Hey guys, tonight we are stepping into a world of lantern glow, wide stone walls, and a heavy hush of centuries. Picture yourself on the Great Wall of China, not in the daylight postcard view, not with tourists snapping selfies, but in the velvet quiet of night during the Ming dynasty. You feel the roughness of the stone beneath your boots. You hear the faint crackle of a torch in the wind, and the world stretches out into darkness on both sides. You've come here as a soldier, standing guard against threats you'll almost certainly never see. And honestly, you probably won't survive this assignment if you actually lived it, because Ming garrisons were notorious for disease, harsh winters, and, well, boredom. But don't worry, we're just imagining tonight. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me in the comments where you're listening from, and what time it is where you are. I love seeing the map of night owls and sleepy travelers come together. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The lantern glow flickers against the gray stone as you shuffle closer to your post. The Ming officials spared no expense on towers. Every half-kilometer or so, another one looms out of the darkness. They're squat, rectangular guardians of brick and stone, meant to last centuries. Inside, the air is thick with soot, the ceiling blackened from endless fires. A soldier before you probably stood exactly where you stand now, leaning against the wall, listening for sounds of movement beyond the ridge. Lanterns are everything here. They're not the delicate paper globes you might imagine, hanging from festival stalls. These are heavy, wooden-framed things, covered in oiled paper or thin silk, tough enough to handle the wind sweeping off the mountains. The guards light them with pine resin torches, and the glow is warm, golden, almost like a small hearth. But it never quite beats the chill. You feel the draft slither across your face, even as the lantern tries to claim its circle of warmth. It's the Ming dynasty, late 15th century perhaps, though time is slippery here on the wall. The empire has pushed enormous resources into fortifying the border against northern nomadic raids. The result? Thousands of kilometers of fortification, staffed by soldiers like you who spend their nights not in pitched battles, but in long stretches of waiting. Historians still argue whether the wall was more symbol than shield, whether it truly stopped invasions or just offered an illusion of safety. What's certain, though, is that the men inside these towers lived a rhythm of watchfulness and weary ritual. Outside the wall, you see only shadows. The mountains are jagged silhouettes against a faint moon. Down below, valleys stretch into mystery. Every gust of wind carries a question. Was that the cry of a wolf, or just the echo of your own imagination bouncing between stones? You pull your cloak tighter, grateful for its coarse wool scratching against your neck. Quirky fact: some soldiers even stitch talismans into their cloaks. Paper charms scribbled with blessings to keep away ghosts, or embroidered symbols for protection. Nothing in the handbook, just private comforts smuggled into uniform. Inside the tower, the lanterns sit in alcoves, lighting the carved niches of the walls. They cast shadows that dance like restless companions. If you stare too long, you'll swear you see figures moving, the outline of another soldier, or something older, watching. Rumors of spirits cling to these watchtowers like moss, and after enough sleepless nights, you start to believe them. The floor beneath you vibrates faintly. It's not an earthquake, it's the wall itself. You're perched on one of the largest engineering feats in human history, a snake of stone laid across mountains and deserts. At night, when you lean against the parapet and close your eyes, it feels alive, breathing under you, shifting under the weight of centuries. You catch yourself thinking, maybe the lantern glow is like the heartbeat of this giant, pulsing softly in the dark. And yet, for all the grandeur, your duties are very ordinary. You're stationed to check the lantern's oil, keep the flame alive, and patrol the edge every so often. Most nights, nothing happens. You walk, you stop, you shiver, and then you repeat. The monotony is what really gets to you. That's why, tucked in some corner, you might find a soldier carving doodles into the bricks, a crude horse, a prayer for his wife's health, a scratchy game board for go or dice. Archaeologists have found plenty of these little graffiti marks, proof that boredom leaves its trace as stubbornly as war. Still, the lantern's glow is your anchor. Imagine the way it halos your hands as you cup them near, trying to steal a little warmth. The flicker throws golden ripples across your face, softening your features, making you look like a ghost of yourself already. The lantern is both friend and enemy. It comforts you, but it also announces your position to anyone watching in the hills. Safety and exposure, always both. As the night deepens, your eyes get heavier. You know someone else is resting inside the tower, curled up on a mat, waiting for their turn. The silence stretches. Your mind drifts. Maybe you think of your village, the clay house, and the mulberry trees. Maybe you imagine the rice harvest you missed. Or maybe you just focus on the flame, hypnotized by its sway. And then, somewhere far off, a wolf howls. Or maybe it was only the wind twisting through a broken parapet. You glance at the lantern again. Still burning. Still steady. A tiny, fragile sun to keep you company in the endless night. You duck back into the tower, shoulders hunched against the chill. The lantern glow follows you only so far, then surrenders to the heavy shadow of the inner room. Inside, the air smells of stone, sweat, and wood smoke. Layers of men who have come before you, leaving behind the faint ghost of their presence. Here, in the belly of the tower, lies the reality of a soldier's bed. If you were hoping for anything resembling comfort, sorry to disappoint. Most garrison soldiers slept directly on the floor, stone, brick, or packed earth. If you were lucky, straw mats had been laid down, a thin cushion against the bite of the ground. These mats collected dust, insects, and probably the occasional flea, but still they were better than nothing. And in the dead of winter, better than nothing is the highest compliment you can give a bed. The bedding situation varied, though. Officers, especially those with connections back in the capital, could smuggle luxuries northward. Silk quilts, cotton blankets, sometimes even a carved wooden bed frame, disassembled and hauled up into the mountains. The common soldier looked on with envy, tucking himself into a rough wool cloak and imagining what it might be like to fall asleep on something soft. Historians still argue whether such class divisions eroded morale or simply reflected the eternal truth of hierarchy in every army. What's undeniable is that comfort was unevenly rationed, even in the middle of nowhere. You kneel beside a mat in the corner. The straw is prickly, and it squeaks faintly as you press down. Imagine trying to get comfortable after a long watch. Your muscles ache, your bones feel carved from ice, and now you're expected to coax your body into rest on a squeaky mat that smells faintly of mildew. No wonder some soldiers padded their bedding with spare clothing or even folded banners. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some garrisons along the wall supposedly issued Kong beds, stone or brick platforms hollow beneath to allow hot air from a fire to circulate. Think of it as an early heated bed, courtesy of smoke and clever engineering. But of course, that only worked in towers with enough resources to keep a fire going all night. Most of the time, soldiers just curled together for warmth, pressed back to back like sardines. It wasn't camaraderie, so much as survival. As you lie down, you hear every sound. The tower amplifies the smallest creak. A boot shifting, a cloak dragging, someone clearing their throat in the dark. You roll onto your side, trying to block it out. The bedding does little to shield you from the cold seeping through the stones, but at least it gives you a place to rest your head. Even the pillow, if you had one, wouldn't feel familiar. Ceramic or wooden pillows were common in China for centuries, shaped like bricks or gently curved supports. The theory was that they promoted better posture and kept elaborate hairstyles intact. You, as a soldier, probably just balled up your outer robe and stuffed it under your neck. Imagine trying to sleep on a glorified roof tile. Some claimed ceramic pillows gave them clearer dreams. More likely, they gave them stiff necks. The lantern light doesn't reach far inside. The glow fades, and darkness presses close. The mat beneath you rustles with every breath. You hear a snore, ragged and unsteady, from the corner. Soldiers slept in shifts, so there was always at least one man snoring, another waking, another trying in vain to find silence. It's like a badly tuned orchestra of exhaustion. And yet, in that exhaustion, you find a strange peace. The wall outside is massive, unyielding. The tower stones are ancient, cold but steady. Your mat, thin and prickly though it is, roots you in this moment. You stretch out, your cloak scratching your chin, and your eyelids grow heavy. Then comes the intrusion of thought. Will tomorrow bring an alarm? Will you be ordered to march further north? Will the officers check the mats for lice again? Your mind spirals, restless, refusing to let the body surrender. You turn over, pull the cloak tighter, and remind yourself, this is the only bed you have. You might as well make peace with it. It's a humble truth, one shared by every soldier of the wall. Comfort wasn't found in the bedding itself, but in the act of claiming space to rest, however briefly. You, here in this drafty tower, on your scratchy mat, are part of a long, unbroken line of weary men who close their eyes against the dark and try to dream of home. And outside, the lantern still burns, its light spilling faintly through the arrow slits, a reminder that even in your rest, the wall keeps watch. You are not asleep for long before the shuffle of boots wakes you. A hand nudges your shoulder, rough but not unkind, and a tired whisper says, your turn. The world of bedding and prickly straw mats fades as you rub your eyes, rise stiffly, and prepare yourself for the rhythm of midnight rotations. The Ming soldiers had to live by strict schedules, and sleep was never truly restful. Watches were divided into shifts called gung, each lasting about 2 hours. There were 5 during the night, marked by the steady beat of drums or the toll of gongs that echoed along the wall. Imagine it, a sound carrying from tower to tower, like a heartbeat rippling across the mountains. First watch, second watch, third watch. The night split into slices of vigilance. And you, unlucky soul, have just been summoned for the middle slice, when your body aches the most and your eyes fight hardest to stay shut. You shuffle toward the parapet, the cold air biting your cheeks. The lantern outside hasn't burned out yet, but the flame is dimmer now, as if even fire grows weary by midnight. You stretch your arms, trying to shake the stiffness from your shoulders. The soldier you relieve is already stumbling toward his mat, his head practically falling forward with exhaustion. His watch is over. Yours has just begun. There is something oddly soothing in the predictability of it. Soldiers traded turns with clockwork regularity, their nights chopped into duties and rests like a grim relay race. Still, historians argue whether this system truly kept them alert or simply made everyone equally sleep-deprived. After all, what is the use of a guard whose head keeps bobbing against the parapet? You walk the wall in the pale moonlight, your boots clicking faintly against stone. The mountains beyond are hushed, wrapped in darkness, so complete it almost feels alive. Every few steps, you pause, lean against the battlements, and scan the horizon. Of course, you see nothing. 99% of nights passed uneventfully, but still your heart beats faster, as if something might be watching. The emptiness itself is its own kind of opponent. Inside the tower, men shift and murmur in their uneasy dreams. Some mutter in their sleep, snatches of dialect from provinces hundreds of miles away, a reminder of the Empire's reach. Quirky tidbit. Records show that garrisons often included men from many different regions, deliberately mixed so no unit had too much local loyalty. That way, if one soldier thought of deserting, he'd be alone in a sea of strangers. Clever in theory, miserable in practice. Imagine trying to sleep while your bunkmate snores in an accent you don't even understand. The rhythm of midnight rotations brings both exhaustion and strange clarity. Your body fights against the pull of sleep, but your mind wanders freely. You think of the day just passed, hauling stones, cleaning weapons, checking the granary. You think of the day to come, already dreading another night like this one. And then, unexpectedly, your thoughts drift somewhere tender. You recall the smell of rice steaming in your mother's kitchen, or the way the mulberry blossoms fell along the road in spring. Memory keeps you company when no one else can. Some soldiers pass the hours with whispered conversations, if the watch captain was lenient. 2 men leaning close, sharing stories under their cloaks to ward off boredom. Others sang softly, almost like lullabies, voices carrying along the parapet and merging with the wind. A tune from home, half-forgotten lyrics mumbled against the night. It was a way to make the endless rotations human again. And, sometimes, there were tricks. Men chew dried tea leaves to jolt themselves awake. Others carried pebbles in their hands, dropping them if their grip slackened, an alarm against dozing off. Historians still argue whether punishments for sleeping on duty were always as harsh as official edicts claimed. Technically, you could face severe penalties, even death. In reality, officers probably settled for shouting, fines, or an extra shift. Either way, you don't want to find out. You blink hard, stomp your feet, and force your body to remember. This is your watch. The hours stretch endlessly. You swear the stars above you are moving slower than usual. The lantern guttering in the wind is your only proof that time is still crawling forward. And then, at last, the low drumbeat rolls across the valley, one tower signaling to the next, like dominoes falling in sound. Your watch is over. Relief floods you as another weary figure takes your place. You nod wordlessly, pass him the responsibility of the night, and retreat into the tower. Your mat looks less like straw now and more like a miracle. You collapse onto it, bones heavy, eyelids already sliding shut. The midnight rotation has passed, and you'll steal what rest you can before the next call drags you awake again. You are not asleep for long before the shuffle of boots wakes you. A hand nudges your shoulder, rough but not unkind, and a tired whisper says, "Your turn." The world of bedding and prickly straw mats fades as you rub your eyes, rise stiffly, and prepare yourself for the rhythm of midnight rotations. The Ming soldiers had to live by strict schedules, and sleep was never truly restful. Watches were divided into shifts called gung, each lasting about 2 hours. There were 5 during the night, marked by the steady beat of drums or the toll of gongs that echoed along the wall. Imagine it, a sound carrying from tower to tower, like a heartbeat rippling across the mountains. First watch, second watch, third watch. The night split into slices of vigilance. And you, unlucky soul, have just been summoned for the middle slice, when your body aches the most and your eyes fight hardest to stay shut. You shuffle toward the parapet, the cold air biting your cheeks. The lantern outside hasn't burned out yet, but the flame is dimmer now, as if even fire grows weary by midnight. You stretch your arms, trying to shake the stiffness from your shoulders. The soldier you relieve is already stumbling toward his mat, his head practically falling forward with exhaustion. His watch is over. Yours has just begun. There is something oddly soothing in the predictability of it. Soldiers traded turns with clockwork regularity, their nights chopped into duties and rests like a grim relay race. Still, historians argue whether this system truly kept them alert or simply made everyone equally sleep-deprived. After all, what is the use of a guard whose head keeps bobbing against the parapet? You walk the wall in the pale moonlight, your boots clicking faintly against stone. The mountains beyond are hushed, wrapped in darkness, so complete it almost feels alive. Every few steps, you pause, lean against the battlements, and scan the horizon. Of course, you see nothing. 99% of nights passed uneventfully, but still your heart beats faster, as if something might be watching. The emptiness itself is its own kind of opponent. Inside the tower, men shift and murmur in their uneasy dreams. Some mutter in their sleep, snatches of dialect from provinces hundreds of miles away, a reminder of the Empire's reach. Quirky tidbit: records show that garrisons often included men from many different regions, deliberately mixed so no unit had too much local loyalty. That way, if one soldier thought of deserting, he'd be alone in a sea of strangers. Clever in theory, miserable in practice. Imagine trying to sleep while your bunkmate snores in an accent you don't even understand. The rhythm of midnight rotations brings both exhaustion and strange clarity. Your body fights against the pull of sleep, but your mind wanders freely. You think of the day just passed, hauling stones, cleaning weapons, checking the granary. You think of the day to come, already dreading another night like this one. And then, unexpectedly, your thoughts drift somewhere tender. You recall the smell of rice steaming in your mother's kitchen, or the way the mulberry blossoms fell along the road in spring. Memory keeps you company when no one else can. Some soldiers pass the hours with whispered conversations, if the watch captain was lenient. 2 men leaning close, sharing stories under their cloaks to ward off boredom. Others sang softly, almost like lullabies, voices carrying along the parapet and merging with the wind. A tune from home, half-forgotten lyrics mumbled against the night. It was a way to make the endless rotations human again. And sometimes there were tricks. Men chewed dried tea leaves to jolt themselves awake. Others carried pebbles in their hands, dropping them if their grip slackened, an alarm against dozing off. Historians still argue whether punishments for sleeping on duty were always as harsh as official edicts claimed. Technically, you could face severe penalties, even death. In reality, officers probably settled for shouting, fines, or an extra shift. Either way, you don't want to find out. You blink hard, stomp your feet, and force your body to remember. This is your watch. The hours stretch endlessly. You swear the stars above you are moving slower than usual. The lantern guttering in the wind is your only proof that time is still crawling forward. And then, at last, the low drumbeat rolls across the valley, one tower signaling to the next, like dominoes falling in sound. Your watch is over. Relief floods you as another weary figure takes your place. You nod wordlessly, pass him the responsibility of the night, and retreat into the tower. Your mat looks less like straw now and more like a miracle. You collapse onto it, bones heavy, eyelids already sliding shut. The midnight rotation has passed, and you'll steal what rest you can before the next call drags you awake again. You wake to the night again, but it's not the clang of gongs or the shuffle of boots that rouses you this time. It's a sound that seems older than the wall itself. The distant howl of wolves, the flutter of owl wings across the moonlit mountains, the faint skitter of some small creature on the stone. You pause, holding your breath, realizing that every shadow feels alive out here, and every sound carries a story. Owls, wolves, and rumors. That's the nocturnal chorus of the Great Wall. Wolves patrol the valleys below in packs, their calls echoing against the ridges and towers. Soldiers learn to recognize the difference between a wolf's call and a human voice, though sometimes the two were nearly indistinguishable. Owls hooted from the trees, their eyes glowing in the lantern light. Quirky fact: some soldiers believe that the calls of certain owls could predict impending raids. If an owl cried 3 times in succession, it was either a sign of danger or just a hungry bird. Historians still argue whether these superstitions influenced actual guard behavior. The wind presses against the parapets, bending the lantern flames and carrying eerie whistling sounds. Somewhere down the ridge, you hear the faint crack of a branch or the rattle of a loose stone. Each noise keeps you alert, even in the midst of exhaustion. The senses sharpened. Every creak, every rustle seems magnified. You can almost feel the shadows creeping closer, though of course, they never do. You remind yourself that much of what soldiers feared was imagined, but the imagination was essential. Nighttime stretches endlessly on the wall, and without a hint of story or superstition, sleep would never come. Soldiers whispered about wandering spirits, phantom cavalry, or the unlucky tower where the previous guard had vanished. Most of these tales were exaggerated, yet they offered structure to the night, a framework for vigilance. You pull your cloak tighter, wrapping yourself like a burrito in rough wool. Even with the chill pressing in, there's something comforting in the repetition of these sounds. The rhythm of the wind, the cry of the owls, the distant echo of wolves. You've grown attuned to it, learning to separate danger from noise, reality from superstition. Some nights, it feels like the wall itself is listening, breathing along with you, offering a strange sense of protection. Quirky habits emerge in response to these sounds. Soldiers sometimes hung small bells from the edges of towers so that the wind itself would alert them to movement. Others carried tiny charms made of bone or paper, tucked into the folds of their garments, a little private reassurance that spirits were on their side. Historians still argue whether these rituals genuinely reduced anxiety or were merely placebo comforts, but for the men stationed here, they mattered all the same. In the dark, you imagine the distant villages, smoke rising from chimneys, dogs barking at strangers. You think of the families who sleep unaware that miles away, someone is listening to the same night sounds, leaning against stone parapets, waiting for a moment of peace. Your heartbeat aligns with the rhythm of nocturnal life, the wind, the wildlife, the lanterns flickering. Sometimes, to cope with the tension, soldiers whispered to one another. Stories of past raids, of daring escapes, or even ridiculous anecdotes from home. Like the time a comrade tried to smuggle a chicken into the tower and it promptly escaped, clucking its way across the floor. You laugh quietly to yourself, careful not to disturb the light dozing of others. Humor, even in whispers, is a powerful medicine for the long, tense nights. You settle back onto your mat, listening to the chorus of creatures, feeling a strange kinship with them. Wolves, owls, and human soldiers alike share the same rhythm of night, each alert, each navigating the shadows in their own way. And as your eyes finally grow heavy, you imagine the entire wall as one giant, breathing organism, alive in the dark, holding countless lives together in silence. You stretch on your straw mat, feeling the slight give beneath you, and notice the subtle differences in how soldiers here rest. Some lie fully extended, arms at their sides. Others curl tightly, knees drawn to chest like small animals seeking warmth. Silk quilts, heavy and fragrant, are a rare privilege, reserved for officers or favored soldiers. Most of you rely on the coarse mats, rough wool cloaks, and sheer willpower to get through the night. Silk quilts versus straw mats. It's the quiet reminder that even on the wall, hierarchy never sleeps. An officer might be tucked under layers of silk, the pattern still pristine despite nights of use, while you cradle your knees to stave off the chill. Quirky tidbit. Some soldiers would sneak small pieces of personal cloth into their bedding, sewing them into hidden corners. A scrap of home fabric, a family emblem, something to make the mat feel slightly less like stone and more like comfort. Historians still argue whether these small acts of personalization were encouraged subtly by commanders or quietly frowned upon, but everyone did it anyway. You notice how temperature plays its part. The towers, lofty and exposed, carry the winter wind like a living thing. Even with layers, a draft curls around your ankles and climbs your spine. Officers might have fire pits or small stoves inside their quarters, but the common soldier learns to improvise. Shared body heat is key. Huddling together, soldiers form human fortresses against the cold. It's a strange intimacy born from necessity, a bond made not of friendship but of survival. The tactile world of sleep here is far from gentle. Straw pricks the skin if you shift too quickly, wool itches relentlessly, stone floors demand attention. Yet, paradoxically, this harshness gives rhythm. You become aware of every subtle movement, the scrape of a cloak, the hiss of a smoldering brazier, the tiny sighs of your fellow sleepers. Your senses sharpen without realizing it. Some soldiers carried extra cushions, rare, precious, often stolen from officers or markets before deployment. Even a folded coat could serve as a pillow, a raised platform for your weary head. And yet, despite these small luxuries, sleep remained precarious. You hear every sound, the wind rattling the battlements, distant wolves, a lantern flame sputtering. Each noise demands attention, even if your mind is desperate to drift. Nighttime also brought reflection. The wall stretches endlessly, and staring at it makes you feel tiny yet connected to a massive enterprise. You consider the construction of this behemoth, the millions of bricks laid by countless hands, the long caravans of laborers and soldiers. Quirky tidbit. Some towers have carved inscriptions, records of laborers' names, or short poems, tiny human footprints in the immensity of stone. Historians still argue whether these inscriptions were merely practical records or secret acts of personal expression, but to the soldier sleeping nearby, they provide a strange sense of companionship across time. You tug your cloak tighter, settling into the rhythm of the night. The contrast between silk quilts and straw mats is tangible, yet irrelevant now. Warmth and rest are scarce for everyone. You focus on what you can control, the mat beneath you, the cloak around your shoulders, the knowledge that the wall endures, and so will you. Sleep is slow to come, but you let the tactile sensations, the faint smells of smoke and straw, the soft breathing of your comrades, and the constant hum of the wind lull you into a shallow doze. The wall outside continues its silent vigil, ancient and unyielding, holding you safely in its stone embrace, even if only for a few hours of fragile rest. Even as you drift towards slumber, your mind carries you elsewhere, back to home villages, winding paths through rice paddies, the smell of wet earth after rain, the soft laughter of children you barely recognize anymore. Dreams of home villages keep soldiers tethered to life beyond the wall, a reminder of warmth, family, and familiar routines that seem impossibly distant. You imagine the smoke curling from chimneys, the flutter of laundry on lines, the quiet chatter at night markets. These memories are luxuries, small treasures tucked into the folds of fatigue. Your fellow soldiers do the same. Some hum faintly in their sleep, tunes learned from mothers or older siblings. Others sketch tiny pictures in the dust or carve initials into wood, leaving traces of their identities in the sterile towers. Quirky fact: some soldiers secretly carried small clay figurines or charms from home, placing them beside their heads for protection or comfort. Historians still argue whether these objects had genuine ritual significance or merely psychological value, but there's no denying the sense of calm they inspired. Sleep here is never deep, but it's enough to carry fragments of dreams. You imagine walking through your village streets, barefoot on cobblestones, passing familiar faces you haven't seen in years. The rhythm of the wall contrasts sharply with the imagined rhythm of home, yet the two intertwine in your mind, a strange lullaby composed of memory and duty. The sensation of longing is palpable. Even during a short doze, your thoughts wander to rice fields, family meals, and festivals you missed. The faint scent of lantern smoke blends with imagined aromas from home. Cooked vegetables, freshly baked bread, steaming tea, and for a moment, the wall feels less isolating. You clutch the memory like a talisman, letting it protect you from the cold and the dark. Some soldiers wrote letters by candlelight during their brief rests, scribbling hurried notes to loved ones or recording thoughts about the day. These papers were tucked into hidden corners, often never sent, but they offered solace. Quirky tidbit: soldiers sometimes folded the letters into origami shapes, tiny cranes or boats, imagining their messages traveling across mountains and rivers. Historians still argue whether these letters were meant for practical communication or simply a private ritual to maintain hope. But for the men writing them, hope itself was enough. The wall stretches outside your small tower, a continuous ridge that connects distant garrisons, villages, and the larger empire. You close your eyes and imagine that the stones beneath you carry not only your weight, but the weight of countless other soldiers. Their memories, dreams, and longings press softly into the stone, a shared experience of humanity spread across miles of fortification. Even the cold doesn't feel entirely hostile now. You've adapted, as soldiers do. Layers of clothing, huddled positions, and careful body awareness allow you to find micro moments of warmth. The flickering lantern light casts reassuring shadows across your small space, and your fellow sleepers breathe in sync with the wind outside. Together, with memory and ritual, you make a fragile peace. Finally, your body surrenders, letting the images of home blend with the gentle hum of the wall. Dreams carry you across valleys and mountains, from straw mats to village roads, reminding you that even in the most remote tower, human connection persists, sometimes faint, sometimes imaginary, but always essential. You wake again, this time to a strange stillness, as if the night itself is holding its breath. The wind is quieted, and the usual chorus of owls and wolves is subdued. You lie for a moment, listening to the heartbeat of the wall, imagining it as a sleeping dragon stretched across mountains and valleys. Its stone spine undulates under the moonlight, silent but monumental, carrying generations of soldiers in its unyielding embrace. Wall as sleeping dragon, that's how you think of it. The parapets rise and fall like vertebrae, watchtowers jutting out like claws, each stone a scale hardened by centuries. Quirky tidbit: some soldiers actually visualize the wall as a living guardian, believing that if they respected it with proper rituals, polishing bricks, keeping fires lit, the dragon would protect them. Historians still argue whether this belief was widespread or just isolated superstition, but either way, it influenced behavior. You stand and run a hand along the cold, rough surface. The stone is both grounding and humbling. Beneath your palm, you feel the cool smoothness of eroded bricks, traces of hands that have touched them before yours. Some soldiers would carve small symbols into the mortar, initials, prayers, doodles, leaving a mark of their existence. You wonder if anyone, centuries later, will feel the same sense of connection you do. The moon casts long shadows along the ridge. You peer over the battlement and see valleys swallowed in darkness, mountains etched faintly against the night sky. The wall stretches endlessly in both directions, a dragon that never sleeps, but allows its human passengers brief reprieves. You feel yourself both infinitesimal and integral, a tiny heartbeat in the chest of something immense. Inside the tower, other soldiers stir lightly. Some adjust their cloaks, whispering soft reassurances to one another. Others sit quietly, eyes half closed, perhaps dreaming of home or imagining the wall as a creature of myth. The shared silence is profound, an unspoken acknowledgement that the wall is alive and that its human guardians are part of its rhythm. You step carefully, boots muffled against the stone. Every movement is deliberate, a dance learned over long nights. Lanterns flicker and sway, casting a warm, wavering glow that makes the tower feel both cozy and fragile. The dragon beneath you seems aware, almost sentient, as if your small actions ripple through its body. Quirky practices persist. Soldiers sometimes leave offerings, small bits of rice, a paper charm, or a folded cloth, at the base of interior niches, believing it would appease the wall's spirit and keep them safe. Historians still argue whether these rituals were standard military practice or personal superstition, but they clearly comforted those who participated. You lie back on your mat, letting the idea of the dragon wall carry you towards sleep. The stones beneath you hum with centuries of human presence. The parapets rise and fall like the rhythm of a breath, and you feel yourself merging with the immense structure, part of its enduring story. The world outside is vast and unknowable, but here, on the back of a sleeping dragon, you find a fragile serenity. The night deepens, and though the wall looms with its dragon-like silence, the mood inside your tower softens. A small fire crackles low in the brazier, shadows fluttering up the stone walls like lazy butterflies. The scent of smoke and faintly singed millet drifts through the chamber, mixing with the musk of damp wool and worn leather. You shift closer, and the glow warms your cheeks, easing the chill that stone bedding can never quite erase. Soldiers settle into their own rhythms. One hums a folk tune under his breath, a melody about boats drifting lazily down a river in Jiangnan, far from these northern winds. Another adds the rhythmic thump of a ladle against a pot, half keeping time, half stirring the embers. Before long, someone cracks a joke about the captain snoring, that it's loud enough to scare away Mongol raiders before they even get close. A few chuckles ripple around the fire. You smile, even if you've heard the same joke 3 times this week. Humor is survival here. Without it, the nights would stretch into unbearable silence. A quirky tidbit slips through the chatter. Some soldiers believe that if you laughed at least once before sleeping, evil spirits would pass you by, mistaking your cheer for divine protection. Historians still argue whether this belief had roots in Taoist ritual or if it was just barracks folklore, but you can see why it stuck. Laughing feels like lighting a lantern inside your chest. As the embers fade to red, someone begins reciting an old ballad. His voice is soft, untrained, yet the lyrics weave through the tower like incense smoke. The story is of a farmer's daughter, her lantern guiding her lover safely home across fields at dusk. It isn't a soldier's song, but maybe that's the point. It carries everyone back to villages, rivers, orchards, the warm smell of kitchens, the presence of people they miss. You let your eyes close, listening. A soldier nearby has tied a little bell to his belt, a makeshift charm. When he shifts, it tinkles faintly, like a lullaby stitched into metal. Others murmur prayers, half audible, words dissolving into the smoky air. These are the quiet rituals that sand down the sharp edges of duty. No one admits it outright, but each small act, the song, the jokes, the charms, is a shield as real as any helmet. Mainstream fact: Ming garrisons along the wall often included conscripted farmers who rotated duty with tending their fields. These men brought with them not only food supplies, but also village customs, storytelling, festival chants, even lullabies sung to children. The watchtowers became unlikely vessels for cultural exchange, where soldiers from different provinces blended traditions. That's why you hear not just one dialect tonight, but a patchwork chorus of accents, all bound together by smoke, stone, and fatigue. The fire dwindles further, and you feel your body sink heavier into your mat. Someone mutters that if the wall really is a dragon, tonight it must be purring. That draws another round of muffled laughter, slow and drowsy. The sound tapers off, replaced by the rhythm of breathing, the occasional snore, and the faint crackle of a coal. You drift along with them, swaddled in the fragile comfort of this improvised community. The Great Wall might stretch unbroken across mountains, but here, within a single chamber, you find that what holds it together isn't just stone. It's the jokes, the songs, the rituals of weary men finding softness in a hard place. The night isn't endless. It only feels that way when the wind presses against the tower like a hand, tugging at the shutters and sighing through the cracks. You're awake again, or maybe you never fully drifted off. Around you, the chamber breathes as if it were a living thing. Soft snores, the shuffle of straw mats, and the occasional cough punctuate the darkness. A dull ache in your legs reminds you that the wall's stairs never end. But tonight your duty is lighter. You're not climbing. You're simply listening. Every so often, a guard outside stamps his boots against the cold. The thump echoes up the stone stairwell, and the vibration seems to hum under your mat. That sound is oddly reassuring. It means someone is awake. Someone is keeping the night from slipping entirely into chaos. Still, the question lingers. How long can any man keep his eyes open at this hour? Historians still argue whether Ming soldiers were strictly punished for falling asleep on duty. Some records suggest lashes or worse, but others note that commanders quietly understood the limits of human stamina. After all, even a dragon-shaped wall cannot banish drowsiness. You picture some poor fellow leaning on his spear, eyelids drooping, while praying that the officer on rounds is equally tired. There's humor in this grim practicality. A quirky tidbit floats back to you. In some outposts, men tied cord from their wrists to bells hung on the rafters. If they started nodding off, the tug would jingle the bell and jolt them awake. Imagine the embarrassment of your bunkmates, chuckling, as the little chime betrays your half-dreams. Like having a nosy grandmother wired into your sleep schedule. Outside, the stars are scattered wide over the mountains, faint but steady. You picture them as lanterns hung by ancestors, countless watchful eyes making sure their descendants don't doze off too soundly. The longer you stare at the faint glow leaking through the arrow slits, the more you feel suspended, half in dream, half in duty. The fire inside the brazier has gone to ash, and the air tastes faintly metallic with cold. You pull your blanket tighter, imagining you're wrapped, not in wool, but in the endless coils of the wall itself. That thought comforts you. You're one scale on the dragon's back, small but essential, warmed by its slow, rumbling breath. Mainstream fact: the Ming dynasty's Great Wall wasn't one seamless construction, but a series of repairs and rebuilds layered upon centuries of older fortifications. Each tower had its own quirks, slightly different stonework, stairwells too narrow, ceilings that leaked. Soldiers joked that the wall had as many personalities as it had miles, some friendly, some cruel. You lie there, caught between wakefulness and drifting. A soldier nearby mutters something in his sleep, words slurred, maybe calling to his wife or mother. Another stirs, tugging the blanket tighter, sighing in the universal language of exhaustion. For a moment, the tower feels less like a fortress and more like a farmhouse loft, everyone pressed close against winter. The irony isn't lost on you. This grand wall, this colossal statement of imperial defense, relies on fragile humans struggling to stay awake at 3 in the morning. And yet, the wall endures, because they do, in their flawed, stubborn way. You let that thought settle like a lullaby, as comforting as any joke or bell rope trick. Your own eyes close again, the rhythm of the guard's stamping boots fading into dream. You wonder if the dragon of stone is also dreaming, and if so, whether it snores louder than the captain. You wake to a gray blur, the kind of light that makes everything look as if it's been dipped in rice water. Dawn doesn't rush in here. It seeps through the arrow slits in hesitant streaks, painting the rough stone walls with diluted silver. The brazier is cold, a dark husk in the corner, and your breath still fogs when you exhale. Around you, the tower is stirring, the way a hive begins to hum when the first bees realize the sun has returned. Someone yawns, so wide it sounds like a roar. Another soldier stretches, joints cracking like twigs, and you roll up your mat, careful not to kick your neighbor in the head. The stone floor leaves a faint imprint on your skin, as though the wall wants you to carry its memory into the day. Historians still argue whether mornings on the wall followed strict drill routines, or whether soldiers enjoyed pockets of unstructured time. Some accounts insist men immediately assembled for roll calls, inspections, and shouted commands. Others hint that dawn was a slower affair, with time to boil tea or share gossip before the officers began barking. You, fortunately, experienced the latter, the gift of a quiet morning where the urgency hasn't yet caught up. Someone has set a pot over glowing embers they coax back to life. Steam curls upward, carrying the faint, earthy smell of millet porridge. Your stomach, traitorous as ever, growls loud enough that one of your bunkmates snickers. Breakfast is thin, but the heat alone makes it taste grand. You sip slowly, feeling the warmth crawl down your throat and bloom in your chest. There's a quirky tidbit you recall about food on the wall. Sometimes soldiers experimented with adding pine needles or even crushed walnut shells to their porridge, not for flavor, but to stretch out rations. Imagine your disappointment when your morning bowl crunches like gravel. Though, in fairness, pine needle tea supposedly had a refreshing tang. You're grateful your portion today is free of forestry additives. Outside, the mountains begin to show themselves, their outlines sharpening as the mist thins. From the watchtower's parapet, you see valleys draped in frost, rivers of fog flowing through gullies, and the endless thread of wall climbing and vanishing into the horizon. The sight is enough to make you forget the chill. Almost. A mainstream fact whispers into your mind. During the Ming dynasty, the Great Wall stretched for thousands of miles, maintained by countless garrisons like yours. Communication between towers was often carried out with smoke signals by day and fire by night, allowing messages to leapfrog across the empire faster than a rider on horseback. Standing there at dawn, you realize this wall wasn't just stone, it was a nervous system, and every tower was a twitching fingertip. The captain appears eventually, rubbing his beard as if trying to erase sleep from it. He doesn't shout, at least not yet. Instead, he squints at the pale sun and mutters something about the cold. His presence reminds you that discipline waits just beneath the surface, ready to pounce once the day properly begins. For now, though, the men are left to finish their porridge and savor the quiet. You lean against the parapet, fingers brushing the frost-crusted stones, and think about how every soldier here begins the same way. Stiff, groaning, warming his hands over steam, gazing at the horizon as though it might offer answers. It's strangely universal, whether you're on a medieval castle wall, a Roman camp, or this dragon-backed marvel of Ming China. Mornings belong to the grumblers and the half-awake. A joke slips into your head as you spoon up the last of your porridge. Maybe emperors built these walls not to keep enemies out, but to make sure sleepy soldiers didn't wander home before breakfast. It's the kind of absurd thought that makes you smile even as you shiver, the kind that keeps monotony from swallowing you whole. By the time the sun clears the peaks, the tower is alive again, footsteps and chatter echoing between the walls. The day is awake, and so are you. Barely. You sigh, knowing the watch continues, whether you've had enough rest or not. You step out into the gray half-light, where the morning mist curls like breath against the ramparts. The stone beneath your boots is still cold from the night, and the silence of the garrison is broken only by the slow, rhythmic clatter of a few soldiers beginning their patrols. It's not glorious. It's not even especially dramatic. It is, quite frankly, just routine, long, dragging hours of walking up and down this enormous backbone of stone, keeping your eyes peeled for dangers that almost never arrive. The Ming commanders called it sunluo, patrol duty, and if you thought it meant daring encounters with raiders, you'd be sorely disappointed. Instead, it was a lesson in boredom. You march a few towers, stop to check if the signal drums are in place, maybe wave to a sleepy companion who's also counting down the hours. You scratch at your uniform. You invent a game where you count how many bricks you can pass before the next hawk swoops overhead. This is soldiering at its most ordinary. Still, patrols are where gossip blossoms. Put 3 tired men on a stretch of wall, and, before long, someone's whispering about who snores the loudest, or which officer supposedly received a love letter tied to a pigeon's leg. The stories take on lives of their own. By the time they reach your ears, a tale about a soldier tripping on uneven stone has somehow turned into him single-handedly fighting off a wolf pack. The wall itself becomes a gossip vine, every tower carrying a rumor like a wind-borne seed. Historians still argue whether Ming soldiers were truly as disciplined as official records suggest. The imperial annals claim order, hierarchy, and neat duty rosters. Yet travel accounts hint at plenty of slacking off, guards gambling with dice carved from peach pits, or sneaking sips of strong wine when their officer's back was turned. One writer even claims to have seen sentries stringing up tiny cricket cages along the parapets, cheering as their miniature champions battled in the moonlight. Whether that's truth or exaggeration, you can imagine how welcome a bit of levity would have been when every day looked almost identical to the last. The patrol paths themselves are brutal. Imagine a Stairmaster workout that never ends, except the steps are centuries-old stone slabs that don't care about your knees. You climb steep inclines, descend into dips, all while wearing armor that rubs your shoulders raw. And yet, the monotony sets in so strongly that sometimes the hardest battle is keeping your eyelids from drooping. Soldiers joked that the wall was the best cure for insomnia. Just walk it for an hour, and you'll beg for your bedding, even if it's only straw and stone. There were lighter moments, though. Soldiers sang softly on patrol, humming folk tunes from their provinces. A man from Sichuan might belt out a mountain ballad, only for his comrade from Shandong to counter with a sea shanty. The mix created a strange, multicultural playlist of Ming China, an empire stitched together not only by walls of stone, but by melodies carried on the cold wind. If you've ever had a friend who insists on singing loudly in the car to stay awake, you'll recognize the same energy here. Sometimes the jokes were practical. One guard might warn his companion, "If you see movement, don't panic. It's probably just a goat." Another might add, "Unless the goat has arrows, then panic." Small humor like this kept spirits afloat. Of course, not every patrol was peaceful. Every so often, a rider would crest the horizon, or smoke would curl in the distance, and suddenly the gossip dried up. The air grew tense, boots struck harder, and weapons were gripped tighter. 9 times out of 10, it was nothing more than a shepherd's fire or a trader moving along the steppe. But that 10th time, well, that's why you stayed awake. The wall trained its soldiers to expect boredom, but also to be ready to leap from drowsiness to alarm in a heartbeat. As you walk, you notice details, the way the mortar crumbles in certain spots, the marks where past soldiers etched little graffiti, snippets of poetry, crude sketches of horses, even the occasional heart symbol scratched beside a name. These are reminders that even in a military machine, human touches seep through. Somewhere, a scholar soldier once scrawled a line from the poet Du Fu before being yanked back to attention. Another carved only the character home. That single word, baked into stone, says more than any official history scroll. The patrol stretches on, an endless rhythm of boots and sighs. The wall seems to go on forever, over ridges, through valleys, across rivers, always demanding more footsteps. The soldiers laugh, they complain, they grow quiet, then noisy again. You can feel the camaraderie building in the monotony. Even if you barely speak, even if you just share a joke about a goat carrying arrows, the long walk makes comrades out of strangers. And when at last the patrol ends, when the officer waves you back toward the tower, you feel the pull of sleep like a tide. Even the gossip fades. You've seen the horizon. You've heard the jokes. You've shouldered the silence. Now, with the duty done, the thought of lying down on that hard bedding seems almost like a gift. You slip back into the tower just as the sun finishes rising, golden light spilling over the wall like paint from an overturned jar. The garrison is stirring fully now. Pots clatter, voices call, and somewhere a mule brays, as if demanding breakfast before any soldier gets theirs. The patrol has ended, but the day has only begun, and your body aches for sleep even though the world insists on waking. The wall itself is alive in this hour. Smoke snakes upward from little cooking fires, carrying the smell of millet porridge that tastes bland yet comforting. Some soldiers joke it has the exact flavor of damn cardboard, though none of them have ever tasted cardboard to know for sure. A pot clangs, someone curses about burning their hand, and the watchtower fills with the chatter of men, describing dreams they barely remember. You might imagine these soldiers as fierce defenders of the realm, but in this moment, they're just tired humans fussing over breakfast like anyone else. Still, the routine presses on. Armor is checked, weapons inspected, reports written by scribes who scowl at ink stains on their sleeves. Historians still argue whether the Ming bureaucracy kept things this tidy at every tower, or whether many soldiers simply fudged the numbers, noting patrols that never happened or exaggerating how many arrows they had left. Some scholars even suggest that by the later Ming years, the wall was less a defense and more a sprawling system of paperwork held together by tired men trying to look busy. Yet there is something undeniably enduring in the ritual. Even when a patrol is dull, even when the porridge is tasteless, the act of going through it all builds a rhythm. And rhythms, as you felt tonight, have a way of lulling you into drowsiness. You picture the wall at night again, torches glowing, soldiers shifting on their feet, the occasional yawn hidden behind a sleeve. Above them, stars blaze unbothered by empire or raiders. A guard leans on his spear, humming to keep awake, while another whispers a story about his village far away. The wall isn't just stone. It's a stage where thousands of small, quiet lives have played out, each moment ordinary yet strangely eternal. And then, consider the scholars' debates. Some claim the wall was a waste, a vanity project stretching across impossible terrain, manned by men who grew resentful of the empire that demanded their sweat. Others argue it saved northern China countless times, giving just enough warning to rally defenses. Both may be true. What can't be denied is that it demanded patience. The patience of stones laid one atop another, and of men pacing mile after mile with no glory, no battle, just the long, endless waiting. There's a quirky tidbit from late Ming records. One outpost supposedly raised geese instead of dogs as alarm animals. The reasoning? Geese were louder, meaner, and impossible to bribe with scraps of food. You can imagine a bleary-eyed soldier waking not to the clash of swords but to the furious honking of a goose, and perhaps muttering that this, too, was part of guarding the empire. Now, after 12 nights with these watchtowers, you realize the gentle truth. Life here was not only about vigilance. It was about enduring monotony, finding humor in goats with arrows or in cricket fights, and keeping each other awake with songs from faraway homes. It was about leaning on stone parapets that stretched further than you could see, knowing you were just one link in a chain of countless men who all kept the same slow watch. And so, as the narrative winds down, you're ready to let go of the marching, the gossip, the porridge, the endless horizon. The soldiers of Ming China fade back into their towers, and the wall stretches into silence once more. The story slows now, like footsteps easing after a long climb. You breathe softer, matching the rhythm of the soldiers laying down their armor, their heads sinking into straw, the hum of sleep wrapping them like a blanket. The great wall recedes into the distance of your mind, not as battlements, not as cold stone, but as a gentle horizon line, rising and falling with the earth's own breath. The voices of the soldiers soften, turning into murmurs you can no longer quite catch. They laugh once more, faintly, before those two dissolve into the hush of night. Above them, the stars hold steady. They have looked down on these watchtowers for centuries, unblinking, unaffected by empire, waiting, always waiting. And below them, you find yourself resting too. The monotony that once felt like duty now feels like calm, a rhythm so steady it lulls you deeper, softer, toward rest. Every worry loosens here. The weight of armor becomes the weight of a blanket. The chatter of soldiers becomes a breeze through the trees. The long, slow marches blur into the steady rhythm of your own breathing. You drift with them, not toward battle, but toward peace. Let the walls stretch out forever. Let the watchtowers stand, but empty of care. Let the soldiers keep their gentle vigil while you close your eyes, knowing the night is long, but safe. And now, the story is done. Sleep comes, patient and quiet, like the wall itself.